Extract kits can be known to make bad beers, but today I plan to change that. For many new homebrewers, extract kits are the logical first step, but sometimes that can lead to a less than premium product. So today I'm teaming up with the crew from Homebrew for Life to see if you can actually make a great brew with Mr. Beer, and specifically what you can do to improve your first brew. I'm TheBruSho, and this is TheBruSho. I'm here with
CH and Maury
from Homebrew for Life, and today we're gonna try and improve the Mr. Beer kit. Almost a decade ago, I got my start with homebrewing, all thanks to a gift I got for Christmas one year. That gift was a Mr. Beer kit, an all-in-one extract beer kit that gives you everything you need to start brewing today. Marketed as one of the simplest and most affordable ways to brew beer, it seemed like my adventure would be off to a great start. Although in reality, my first batch was awful. I followed the instructions, but outside of that, I was as lost as a goose. Barely drinkable, I still found myself pouring a pint and saying, "Wow, I made beer." There was something about the magical process of fermentation that had me hooked, and from there, the rest is history. Since that first Mr. Beer batch, I've expanded my knowledge, experimented, and tested out new techniques to better myself as a brewer, and I can proudly say that I've come a long way from that first extract kit. So when CH and I had the idea to play with the Mr. Beer kit, I was so down. The idea was that CH would brew the Mr. Beer kit as the instructions state, using his skills as an experienced brewer to try and make the best beer possible. And I would brew the same recipe and try and find a way to improve it beyond what's given in the kit. It was an interesting experiment for sure, so definitely check out CH's video to see how his beer came out. My hope is that if you're just getting started, you can take some of the nuggets of info in this video so that your first extract batch can be as amazing as possible. Now let's get into it and talk about the kit. They sell a few Mr. Beer kits online, and today I'm using the starter kit, specifically the light beer starter kit. This is the exact same kit I got when I first brewed, so I figured it was fitting. And boy, I'm having some nostalgia flashbacks having this in front of me. The kit comes with everything you need to get started, including a fermenter, which is a 2-gallon plastic barrel that has a spigot. It doesn't use an airlock, instead it has small divots on the top where the lid sits, that allow the CO2 to escape. An interesting design, but it does have me a bit worried about unwanted oxygen getting in. Also, you get a tin of malt extract, which is basically condensed wort. Depending on which one you get, will determine the type of beer you're making. This malt extract is pre-hopped, which means there's no extra hops included in the kit. It already has the bitterness in the extract. Also, the can doesn't say what kind of malt or hops it uses, so there's that. Inside the cap on the extract tin is a packet of yeast. Also, no descriptor on what kind of yeast. I'm assuming it's a lager yeast since this is a light beer, but I can't say for sure. Lastly, there's a packet of no rinse cleanser for cleaning and sanitizing, and a packet of Brew Max Booster, which is extra fermentable sugars to boost the ABV of your beer. And that's it. Although it's vague what's in all these items, it's what you might expect from a beginner kit. They want you to just get started brewing and keep it simple. There's also an instruction kit with it, and for the most part I'm going to follow it, but there are a few key things I want to highlight since I now have some experience. First up is the fermentation temperature. They recommend storing the fermenter between 68 and 78 degrees Fahrenheit, and state that the ideal temp for fermentation is 70 to 72 degrees. Knowing what I know now about off flavors, ideal firm temp for ales is below 68 degrees, not above. And if this is a lager yeast, you want it to be much cooler, closer to 55 degrees, so that you have the cleanest tasting beer possible. And I can tell you right now, I definitely did not make note of this the first time. I threw the fermenter in a closet and let it run wild, probably getting up to the high 70s. Oops. So there's one thing we need to address. There's two ways you can go about it. The first is finding a way to ferment cooler by using a fermentation chamber, which can be costly, or we can always go with an ice bath. But since we don't even know what type of yeast we're working with, I think a logical fix is to change out the yeast to something we know. And in my opinion, there's no yeast more beginner friendly than Kvike. It does well in warm temperatures, making it extremely clean with minimal off flavors. And usually if you're just starting out, then you really don't have a way to keep things cool. It should help improve the overall flavor by minimizing any weird flavors that come from stressed, overheated yeast. While we're talking improvements, let's talk about hops. One major component to how your beer tastes is the hops you choose. And in this kit, you're given no choice, except whatever was used in the extract. The hops used in the extract are probably just for bittering, which is good, but one way to add a ton of flavor and depth in a kit like this is to add some additional hops. You can really use any hop you like, but I think picking a variety with a ton of aroma and flavor will do your beer wonders. Today I'll be using some Citra hops, but I'll talk about how I use them in a moment. First, let's get brewing. Start by heating up 4 cups of water in a large stock pot. I'm just using one from my kitchen, but if you plan to brew larger batches, it's a good idea to invest in a larger kettle. Also, I recommend using filtered or spring water for this. Tap water can have a lot of negative compounds that impact your beer. Best to start on a fairly clean slate. Water is an important topic for beer, but for now there's no need to get more complicated. As the water heats up, I add in the booster pack to dissolve. While that dissolves, let me show you a trick with malt extract. It's super thick and sticky, so in order to get the flow better, set it in a pot with hot, near boiling water for about 5 minutes. This will loosen things up. When the water is to a boil, shut it off and then open and add in your malt extract. Turning the burner off prevents any scorching on the bottom, which can taste awful. Once you feel like it's all mixed in, you can then turn back on the burner and bring it to a boil. Let's now talk about adding in more hops.
You know, I heard they recently decided to add more hops to it.
As I mentioned, it's good to use a flavor and aroma forward hop, so I'm going with Citra Cryo hops. These are left over from my hazy hop cider. Citra adds in a pop of citrus and floral notes that in the end will make this more like an IPA than a light lager, but without having the ability to change the malt in the extract, this is the simplest thing we can do to add depth to the flavor of the beer. Of course, you can do a partial mash if you have the ability, but again, I'm not trying to overly complicate things. And the cryo hops work great here, since they have less vegetal matter, meaning they won't absorb as much of that precious wort for small batches like this. So once the wort comes to a boil, keep an eye on it and try not to let it boil over like me. I swear, I looked away for 1 second. Having a spray bottle with water is a good hack to keep things from boiling over. Once it hits a boil, go ahead and turn it off, and then add in the hops. This is kind of like a flame out addition, which will add some bitterness, but mainly impart a lot of flavor and aroma. Also at this time, I add in some yeast nutrients to help with fermentation. DAP and Fermate O, enough for 2 gallons. The reason for adding these nutrients is because I have no idea what nutrients are in the extract, and usually for light beers I need to add a little bit to ensure the yeast can perform well. You'd probably be fine without this, but I have some on hand, and while I'm making improvements, I figured, why not? Then just let it cool down. Over in our fermenter, it's time to add in the cold filtered water to the 1 gallon mark. Cold water is meant to cool down the hot wort, bringing you into a good range for pitching yeast. Speaking of which, we can now add in the wort. Just be careful not to spill or burn yourself. Give it a good mix and top up to the 2 gallon mark with more water. At this point, the wort should be cooled down to take an original gravity reading, and I got a reading of 1.042. Finally, we can add in our yeast. Like I said, Kvike is super forgiving when it comes to temperature. This Voss strain specifically says it will perform well anywhere from 77 to 104 degrees. So as long as you're in that range, you're good to drop the yeast in. I'm adding in just a half packet since it's a small batch. Then close it up and give it a good shake to incorporate oxygen and make sure everything is mixed well. Another step not in the instructions. Now just set it in a dark spot for a few days to ferment. After about a half day, I could smell the hops throughout my whole house. The lack of airlock sent the aroma everywhere, and I wasn't mad at all. The hop scented candle, anyone? Then after 4 days of total fermentation, all activity had appeared to stop. So I took a quick final gravity reading and got 1.012, meaning this beer comes in at 3.9% ABV. Very light. I can't imagine how light it would be without that Boost Max stuff. Anyway, from there I carefully transferred the beer into a keg using a bottling wand. This was to help the beer transfer slowly and to minimize oxygen exposure. If you have bottles in your kit, you can just follow the instructions or use a priming calculator to get your carbonation. Once it was all in the keg, I closed it up, purged with CO2, and set the pressure to 10 psi. Once it was fully carved, it was officially ready. Time to do some taste tests with CH and Maury. My expectations are, I'm kind of nervous a little bit.
I'm looking forward to this. I'm not expecting much. I don't think we really have anything to lose.
Hopefully these last, 9 years and our combined experience, we can make something good.
The way I did it, we just followed it all the way from the instructions that came with it.
And in my version, I added some cryo hops to it, and as well as swapped out the yeast for Kvike to kind of make it a little bit faster and add a bit more punch and depth of flavors.
Yeah, he's got the Mr. Beer Kit on steroids, and we're gonna see if we could taste the difference. And based off that, if it's good beer, we could probably ultimately vouch for the price point, but we'll see. Time will tell. All right, so I got the BrewShos right here. Straight off the gate, it's a little bit darker.
So on this side, I have the CH brewed one, and here's mine with the extra hops and different yeast.
I'm gonna go for ours first because I think it's gonna be the worser one, the less better tasting one, the least better tasting one.
It's a lot cleaner and better than I thought it would be, but we've also got like some brew experience.
It's okay. It's not bad. For a shot in the dark first timer beer set, I would not be bummed out if that happened.
If this was my first beer I ever made, I'd be pretty psyched about it. I don't really detect any like off flavors. It's a little bit on the sweet side, very like malty.
Seems like most people their very first try it ends up being like horrific.
It's definitely way better than the beer that I brewed my first time around. So I'm very pleased with it. I will say that it's not overly complex. It's kind of pretty basic.
This kind of reminds me of like I poured beer in Honey Nut Cheerios and like ate all the Cheerios, and this is what's left over. Like it has this odd like little bit of sweetness, like caramel and honey.
And if I brewed a 5-gallon batch of that and it came out like that, and maybe I was trying to brew an IPA, I would just lie to all my friends and say I was trying to make like a honey cream ale. It would work. It would taste exactly like that.
But let's see how it compares to the one I made.
The aroma is like 10 times better, and I think that's from the Cryo Citra hops.
Oh my God, like night and day for the aroma. But yeah, it actually smells like a real beer, a real commercial beer.
It's got a good punch of that fruit, citrus, floral note, and it almost feels a little bit more crisp. I don't know. Maybe it's just the hops that are expressing the bitterness.
But all in all, you're almost a very like similar flavor besides that like Citra addition. You can feel the backbone of this with the hop addition that made it a little bit better.
Yeah, it's much better. I think I could definitely tell the difference in a blind taste contest.
This turned out really great. I think that switching up the yeast and adding some hops definitely added some needed character to an otherwise pretty plain beer. So thanks for watching, and I think we can all say that making small improvements to the Mr. Beer Kit makes a big difference.
Yeah. Adding premium quality ingredients can drastically improve the quality of your beer through a Mr. Beer Kit.
Yeah, I think the ingredients themselves that come with the kit are very basic. They're intended to get you started in the hobby, but that doesn't mean you have to make bad beer. You can always improve and make better.
Mm-hmm. Stop by your local homebrew shop and ask them about hops and specialty grain that you can use for steeping.
Or buy them online, get them on Amazon. I mean, they're very accessible, especially the more popular stuff.
So big thanks to CH and Maury for having me here. Cheers, guys.
We're hetero life mates.
Cheers to eat. Cheers to having fun. Which Ramada?
Cheers and happy brewing.
Yep.
Happy brewing.
Clink, clank, clink. More clinks.
Thanks for sticking around and watching this fun experiment and collab. Be sure to head over to Homebrew for Life right now to watch his side of the experiment so you can get his perspective.